Hi there, I'm Scott T. Forsyth, professional voice actor and pop culture enthusiast. Today we're talking about the late, great gaming conference, the Electronic Entertainment Experience, or Expo if you're a little bit older, otherwise known as E3. We'll be going over the history of the conference, how it's impacted pop culture, and why I think it's best of all. But first, let's take a quick break and get right back to the show. Full transparency, I have no experience in the games industry or any involvement in E3 in like a professional sense. So even though I said we're going to be going over its history, I'm going to be doing it in like pretty broad strokes because I want to focus on what E3 means to me and how it's impacted me as a fan. So that's where I'm coming at. If you want like a deep dive and deep history, it's not going to be here. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with E3, it was born out of the idea that like the gaming industry needed a place to show their games. Before then, video games were primarily marketed in like commercials or within like electronic trade shows. So like if Sony was unveiling a new brand of TVs, if they're showing off all of their tech stuff, they would tack on like, oh yeah, and then the PlayStation 2 has like Jak and Daxter. So it was kind of like an afterthought thing. But as gaming got bigger and bigger, around 1995, we had the first true E3, the Electronics Entertainment Expo, with Nintendo, Sega, and Sony headlining the conference. I mention that because it's kind of important because a big part of E3 is having these flagship companies who are kind of like the big three in video games headlining everything. It's like that's what we're going to go see, and then things will be tacked on to their conference. Like recently, Sony. Oh, here's an even better example. At Xbox's E3, I don't know exactly when, but the game Elden Ring was shown at the Xbox conference. So alongside like Xbox wanting to show, oh, hey, we have Halo, we have Gears of War, some people will then buy in a spot for like, I don't know, advertisement, kind of like in a Super Bowl-esque thing. And so even though Elden Ring came out on a variety of different consoles, it was shown at Xbox's conference. So it's kind of a big deal for these like big tentpole companies to be showing their stuff, and then smaller companies will be kind of like segmented within these companies. And all of this was done in the Los Angeles Convention Center in Los Angeles, California. And so, yeah, that's when it really like kind of started. It kept going. Obviously, back then they had Nintendo, Sega, and Sony, but nowadays, or for a while, it was Nintendo, Xbox, and Sony because Sega stopped making video game consoles and became a publishing company. It used to be Microsoft, but then Microsoft transitioned and had just Xbox games be their service and everything. So there's a little bit like of some in the weeds of everything, and that's kind of because E3 has had a troubled history. Like throughout its inception, it's moved locations multiple times. They really try to have it at the LA Convention Center, but a lot of times it's very ill-equipped to have the number of people that arrive for the show. For the longest time, E3 was only for the press, so people who reported on video games and video game journalists or game development people went, but then they opened it up to fans if you could buy a ticket. Then they opened it up to influencers and content creators. And I mean, it's kind of been a nightmare. As much as I love E3, I have heard that it's a cool event, but if you're working it, it's kind of pretty bad. And the troubles don't really stop there. I mean, with the rise of streaming media and like online content creators, as I said, like having a main platform for people to show off their games is like really nice and really cool, but it's like way more effective to just like drop your trailer on Twitter and then have everybody react to it, especially in modern day. And this has been increasingly kind of the direction that pop culture news is being like filtered for an audience. Marvel does this all the time. I keep talking about how I'm watching this, and I keep talking about stuff being like in like person or live events and this like big trade show. Okay, so I do need to make this clear. From now on, when I'm talking about watching it, yes, there are in-person events for E3, or there used to be, but the majority of people, including myself, watch it live streamed. Whether it's the actual E3 conference live streaming it through their YouTube or Twitch, or a particular company using their own channel and platform to live stream it. I hope that clears things up. I hope that makes sense. I needed to say that because for me, I'm like, oh, watching E3, I've been doing this for years, is totally like second nature to me. But I know that for another audience, I need to explain that this is a live stream. That's the best way that I can say it. And the majority of stuff that I will talk about in this episode is watching a live performance live streamed, much like watching a football game. You're watching the live sport where there are people in attendance, but you were seeing it through your TV. You were seeing it through your computer. Interesting little anecdote. In 2013, Nintendo kind of dropped out of E3, or at least dropped out of being in, like, needing to be there live and have this big show. And they just went completely digital with a thing called the Nintendo Direct, which is now, like, immensely popular. And people have now modeled how they announce things off of Nintendo Directs. Like, this was a monumental, huge thing that Nintendo did, and it all was because of, like, they didn't like the direction E3 was going, and they're like, we don't really see the point of this. I mean, I'm sure that even if people aren't super into games, they've heard of Nintendo Directs. I mean, I even did a ScottyMeLad Direct at the beginning of this year to kind of, like, showcase all the stuff that I was going to do, and modeled it after Nintendo. And then obviously the biggest elephant in the room is COVID-19. I mean, E3 is so much about being in there, being in person, and like these big reveals and people coming out. There's one year Keanu Reeves came out to show off Cyberpunk 2077. So it got canceled in 2020. It went all digital in 2021. It got canceled this year. I mean, it's been a little bit of a dumpster fire. Little add-on, but as E3 went on, it changed from expo to experience, and I think they did that because of, like, a lot of people were going all digital, so it's not an expo, it's an experience, but still, there's 3 E's, E3, that's what people call it. So, yeah, there's kind of, like, a little bit of the history. I mean, you could obviously dive in more deeper. If you want to. It's very fascinating on how everything was made. But you might be thinking, okay, so like what's best of all about this? This like kind of sounds like a nightmare. Yeah, and a little bit of it is, but like to me, this is like gamer Christmas, which I hate the term for. And it's just kind of made this tradition of in the month of June, gaming companies want to show off what they have and what's going to come out in the upcoming months or sometimes years. But like, it's such an interesting idea because there's really not that many ways to have a consumer product relationship in pop culture. And I'm not the biggest like corporation loving person, but like I do love Marvel, I do love Star Wars, I love Disney, I do love video games. So like I do get excited about seeing the types of games and types of media that I like. You know, nowadays we have May the 4th and the D23 Expo, the Disney 23 Expo. But like those are more recent and really were only born out of the interest of E3. Like E3 walked so that all of these could run. And like for me, like this and it was, and it still is an exciting time. Like I've found that this is such a exciting way to spend my time and to get excited about, you know, the things that I love. And it's always around the month of June, which in Texas is like way too hot to do anything. And my birthday is at the like final day of June. So like this kind of gives me something to do throughout the month. And I always make sure I'm available to watch the different press conferences and live shows. Like, I've been doing this for years, probably since like 2006. That doesn't sound late enough, but that might be right. Like, all my friends know, like, oh yeah, like, Scotty's going to be covering E3. So if they have a question, they're like, hey, was a cool game announced? Oh, like, how was this conference? They like ask me. Over the years, I've made videos on ScottyMeLad about covering my favorite games that I saw at E3. You can check those videos out, and we can kind of see how they've held up and stuff. I've made bets with my friends, which I'm known to do, about like predicting what's going to be there and like what doesn't have a chance of being revealed. But then like you kind of hope that like something crazy, that like if someone says, oh man, they're gonna show off Super Mario Brothers 4, and I'm like, no, that's never gonna happen. But in the back of your mind, you're like, man, if that happens, it's gonna be so cool. I'm gonna lose my mind. Like, I've hosted watch parties, and like, I'm talking a lot about myself, but like, this is a really big season for me because it's like a way for me to engage with a community. I've never been, especially growing up, I've always been very hesitant to talk to people about like video games in real life, and especially online. But like, when you have kind of this very singular thing to talk about that a lot of people watch and really enjoy, because they know even if they don't like 90% of it, there's going to be that 10% of something that's going to like really like grab onto them. And it's been a way for me to like connect with my favorite creators. Shout out to Kind of Funny and Polygon. And it's been a way for me to connect with like fans of that, of like the same people that I watch and listen to, and then like make bets and predictions. I don't know. It's just like really fun. I think it's like the most wholesome way to share what we hope to see out of the gaming industry and what we love out of the gaming industry. Like, because as we've gotten older, we've seen a lot of the video game industry like being really problematic with like a lot of harassment towards women, and just like toxic communities in general. Then we've also seen of where like crunch time has been a really big issue, and like making these games that we love is like really rewarding for the player, but like can be detrimental for the people who make it. And that's like really sad. And finally, we're starting to unionize and like make sure that, you know, the thing we love doesn't destroy people's lives. And I've always seen E3 as kind of a way to show like what's so, you know, unique about this series, about this like form of media, this pop culture touchstone. Because like we really don't have another equivalent to this. The only other equivalent of like an E3 in something other than video games for me is probably like in football or in sports in general, where you have like a fantasy draft or a National League draft, like something where people are excited to see who's on what team, what trades are they going to make, or people who are writing up their own fantasy drafts in the beginning of a season. It's like they're just making E3 predictions. That's all they're doing, and it's kind of cool. And it's just, I don't know, it's really unique. And even though it's pretty much dying out, and I know by next year they're probably going to do another E3, and it's not going to go well. Like the spirit is still alive. It's kind of become this way to focus and celebrate on like games that make people happy and games that people can get excited about, games that people can experience for the first time, or games that people are ready to return to after like years longs of hiatus. And so if we can just continue to focus on that, then I think we'll be able to carry the torch of like what E3 started as we evolve and grow into, I don't know, this hobby, career form of art that people love. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's cool. I like it. It's funny. This episode was definitely meant to be kind of like I don't know, I was jokingly called this like an ode to E3. I did not mean to make it like a love letter for E3, but I don't know. This is the way this turned out, which is kind of cool. So typically this would be the part of the episode where I would say like, this is where you can watch or where you can play. So you can't really do that with E3. And and the worst, I was going to say, you can find like some highlights of like what makes E3 cool. I don't know, but if you want to get a good indication of like E3, I have a bunch of videos on it. I have E3 over the years, and you can see like kind of, you know, games that I probably have released that I've been excited to talk about. Some stuff is super dated. I know I talk about like Fallout 76, and I'm like so excited to play it, and that game was a train wreck when it first came out. But yeah, it's just kind of check on your gamers in the month of June, kind of figure out like what they like and what they don't. This might be a very niche like episode, but I don't know. It's for a niche topic of gaming. For those of you who are listening to this episode as it's going live, I guess I will say this. So the equivalent of E3 that we have is the Summer Games Fest. It's created by the guy who does the video game awards at the end of the year, Jeff Keighley. He's trying to kind of bring back E3, and you know, he does a really good job of, again, like what I was saying, of like carrying the torch of like celebrating games. I actually really enjoyed the Summer Games Fest last year, but this year the Summer Games Fest will be on Thursday, June 9th. It's going to be on at 1 p.m. Central Time. You'll have to do the calculations yourself for your time zone. I apologize. And then if you missed that, then on Sunday, June 12th, Xbox is going to have their game showcase. And recently, Xbox has like acquired dozens of different companies. So they're probably the one to watch and to look out for, because they're going to have a lot of cool games. And then at the time of recording, we don't know anything about Nintendo, but most likely Nintendo will do a June 2022 Direct. So there's the what's what on E3. If you have any thoughts on the gaming industry, or maybe one of your favorite moments of E3, feel free to email us at mail@ScottyMeLad.com, and your letter might be even read on the show. You can also stay up to date on all things Best of All on Twitter at ScottyMeLad under the hashtag BestOfAllPod. You can also see all my live tweets and coverage of E3 as a pop culture enthusiast, a gaming enthusiast. But hopefully you've taken something out of this episode and will give video games a shot. But best of all, you were a listener. And you listened to me ramble about a very dead press conference that doesn't exist anymore. That kind of does, but it doesn't. And me at ScottyMeLad, thank you. Just me. Just Scott D. Forsythe thanks you. And that's my closer. You gotta find a better term for gamers. Best of All was hosted and produced by Scott D. Forsythe, using the song Mia by Rolando Puchades from the album Canta as our intro and outro theme.